Hi guys, my name's Tariq Mwendo. I'm joined by Ryan Chatterjee, Kieran Williams, and Jack Bryant for the first episode of the Rugby Podcast. I guess we should get straight into it and discuss all things Gallagher Premiership, and we're mostly going to be looking to as it's getting nearer. Who's realistically the favourite to win the Prem? Would we say?
Well, I say the favourite's still Saracens.
I agree. I think it's not even close at the moment, to be honest. They're just running away with it, so I can't see them losing anytime soon, to be fair.
Exactly.
I'm the same. Sorry, I don't think anyone can beat Sarries now.
No.
So we're ruling out maybe potentially Exton, Leicester. Do you reckon they have something up their sleeves, or nah, or maybe even Harlequins looking towards
Yeah,
the
I was going to say, I think the only team that could pull it back is Harlequins.
Well, yeah, I think Harlequins have proved to be like a very good playoffs team, especially looking at that comeback against Bristol last year
Or is
before.
that Bristol being a bad playoff team?
But as of now, it's Saracens, Sale, Harlequins, and Gloucester top four. So I wouldn't rule out Gloucester. I think
I see
become
Gloucester slipping up that top four spot.
I see Gloucester dropping out, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Gloucester will maintain it. Well, it's quite tight at the moment. I think up to eighth place, everybody's within a chance. Some Bristol fans are saying, at the position we're in at the moment, we could potentially make a comeback, but I honestly don't see that happening.
No, I completely agree.
So would you? So I mean, potentially this season. So you're completely ruling out a Bristol top four finish. You don't think that's possible at all?
I think the way the league is and how tight it is, I think if they click, they could probably get into that top, like that maybe fourth position, but they would go right down to the last round.
Well,
if in my opinion, if you're Bristol now, I'd be trying out the younger talent, ready for next season. I wouldn't bother even trying to climb the table. It's gone.
It's hard. Well, Six Nations, I think. Obviously, we're losing players like Genge and Sinclair, but at the same time, the big teams like Saracens, Harlequins, Exeter, they're losing internationals as well. So that there's potentially a gap for Bristol to try and claw their way back, I think.
Would you not say the same, for example, for Bath or London Irish and Newcastle? Because they don't have mass amounts of Six Nation players. So it's kind of the bottom table are kind of going to close the gap a bit. Definitely. It's going to be interesting.
Definitely. I think it's quite interesting just like how tight everything's been. And that's why I think like I know like some Bristol fans are more outspoken than others saying like completely ruling out Bristol coming back. But I just think, as we're saying, like with when the style of play clicks, I think we're going to be dangerous. I just think it's a matter of time before that happens.
Agreed.
Yeah, 100%.
So the next topic, Pat Lam in or out?
I'm gonna kick this off and say completely out.
Yeah,
get rid of him. He needs to go.
Yeah,
I disagree. I'm going to disagree with Kieran and Jack on this one. I think we need Pat Lam to stay, and I don't think it's necessarily because he's the best manager in the world. I just think there's no other manager that will come in and do a good job at the moment.
I think Bristol fans right now are being very reactionary in terms of we can't forget what Pat has done for the club. In a long time, this is the best Bristol has been in a long time, and that's thanks to him.
Is it down to him though, or is it down to the mass amount of money and player wages that they spent on new players coming in?
It goes hand in hand.
It's Lansdown's wallet really that has done this. Yeah. We basically bought the league last season, then we couldn't finish the job, and now since then he's just gone so far downhill this year. So it was all down to the coach.
But I think the thing is with Pat, he's proven that he is a game winner. He's done it at Connacht. He's proven that he has the ability to build good teams. And I realistically, like what Rohan said as well, who else replaces him at the moment?
I just want to add a point. How many times have you heard Pat Lam talk about learnings week in, week out, and nothing seems to be changing? Every interview is you talk about learnings, and then it's the same Bristol team that comes out the next day.
So would you pin that on him or would you pin that on the players?
I'd 100% pin that on the coach.
Because I'd say injuries don't help Pat Lam, but also Pat Lam doesn't rotate or he doesn't keep the fitness with the Bristol players. Like it just seems like they have too much freedom. Like they do whatever they want, and that's my view anyway. I don't think they're a team almost.
Should there have been a realistic expectation for Bristol to perform? I think as you just touched on there, like with the amount of injuries they had, I mean, like maybe a lot of our top players were injured at the start of the season, and as anyone knows, like I think it's across the board for most sports. The way you start is usually reflective of the way you're going to finish. Teams that get off to a hot start can carry on that form, but that's why I think Bristol's in the position it is in now. I think it's hard to make up that lost ground.
Even with all the players that Bristol have brought in the last couple of seasons, like Randrandra, Piatau, Ibatone, like Bradbury, he's another one. Do you not think they should at least be in mid-table or even higher with the players they have, regardless of the injuries? Like they can rotate players like Andy Owen for Randall, for example. They're not bad substitutes, and they're still bottom of the league.
Yeah, I do agree with you that with the team we have, we should be playing better, 100%.
Yeah, well, for me anyway, the things that they're doing at the moment, what it says to me is that they're sort of investing more in their future rather than results this season, because at the moment, they brought in a new kicking coach who they're looking to like revolutionize the way they kick. Stuff like this just doesn't happen in 2 or 3 weeks. Like they're looking for next season, the season after that, to build something and rebuild. And the players, they're going to lose a lot of players at the end of this year. They're going to gain some. So I think it's just expect a rebuild, and you don't necessarily need a new coach to rebuild things.
Would you not say though, Rohan, that Bristol have the players now to still compete, but also build for the future?
No.
Yeah.
When you say that Bristol have the players, what in particular? What players are you talking about? Genge, obviously.
Well, I'm talking about the internationals. I'm talking about the big bucks, like the Piataus, the semis.
No.
All like the superstars, basically.
You need to look at how much they've played in the last season or so, and although they did contribute a lot when Bristol were playing well, they're getting injured a lot. That could be down to player management, but they're not offering what they're worth at the moment, and that's why this rebuild is coming at the end of the season, because they need it. They need players who are gonna maybe they will be collecting a big wage, but they'll be performing week after week, not just every now and then.
I'll ask you a question. Do you think Pat Lam's style is going to win Bristol a Premiership title?
Yeah. Well, just adding on to what Rohan said about building onto the future, Bristol's had the best academy for the last 2 years. So in theory, we have the best young players. Pat Lam signed an 8-year contract extension. So I think if I was Pat, the pressure to win, not necessarily the pressure actually, I don't think it logically makes sense for Bristol to push now and push to win, because realistically you can only sustain that for 3-4 years, right? It's better that Pat builds something, works with those young players, and almost creates a dynasty that can compete for the future. Because realistically now we can't compete. We can't compete right now. We don't like.
No, but even so, Taddy, like we might have had the best youth academy for the last 2 years, but if you didn't develop those players, which I know Pat Lam's trying to do, but in 3 years they could be the worst academy players out of the whole league. Like it's very dependent on how they get developed. It's very dependent on how the team performs.
Yeah, but how do they develop? That's not Pat Lam.
How they develop is, if you look at the way the academies work, for a lot of under-18s that go and that are kept on into the senior academy, in other teams they get uni contracts, they go to uni, and they're not spending all time with the team. But in Bristol they do it differently. Like everyone that gets a contract or a scholarship stays there, and
they get the mentor as well.
Time rugby players. They're playing in the Prem Cup. They're on loan to Nat 1 teams, so they're getting the best development.
I think the Prem Cup is arguably one of the biggest development tactics Pat Lam has at his disposal. I think for every team, it's the league where the younger players can really put their hand up and get into the first team and break through.
The Prem Cup is probably the worst thing for the development of young players in the country. What this country needs to do is mimic something almost like how they have in South Africa, the Currie Cup, which is a consistent league for younger players to play in against other young players. Because the Prem Cup is a knockout competition, right? So these guys play their knockout matches and then that's done. But if you had a system where under 18s were playing regular rugby against the best or other youth players within academies across the UK, the national standard for younger players, for newly signed players, would be so much higher than what it is right now. I don't think it makes sense to get someone that's playing uni rugby, and obviously uni rugby is a very high standard, and then say to them, okay, now you're in the first team for Bristol Bears. Like it doesn't.
Do you think the Prem Cup should be restructured
It should be a league.
more competitive.
It should be a league. I think from 18 to like 22-year-olds.
Yeah.
What do you think there should be like an age cutoff? So, for example, is only under 23s that can play, for example, in the cup.
Well, realistically, an 18-year-old prop can't go against a 30-year-old prop in terms of the size, in terms of experience. They're going to get demolished in the scrums. Like no matter how strong they are, they just haven't got that experience. I think the only sort of age that can really seamlessly, at 18-year-old go into professional English rugby, probably winger. We've seen with the likes of like Louis Rees-Zammit, Henry Arundel, people like Cassius Cleves making their debuts quite early, but you don't really. It's a rarity to see like an 18-year-old prop go to the Prem and dominate. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think for a young athlete who's like in that age bracket, if you're a forward, it's really hard to develop into a first team role. Whereas
I don't know. I just think so. What Taddy said about the age categories and having a certain amount of age, what that does is it lowers the standard of the competition. And I think that if you wanna increase like development, the best way to go about that is by raising the standard of the competition and getting the young players to play with the more experienced players, learn from them, learn from, for example, a more experienced player is playing inside you, you learn more.
But do you not think, Rohan, that just... I was just going to say, do you not think that just makes teams want to play their good players to then try and win the competition, for example?
Not necessarily, because it's a good opportunity to give players...
It's a good opportunity, but then you're giving up spots.
Well, okay, if you look at like other competitions like the FA Cup, the Carabao Cup, it's a good opportunity to rotate and get younger players in.
Yeah, but for example, Man City, they play usually their best team most of the time. Like they do rotate, but they still play like their best players because they want to win everything. Because that's
isn't there a reserves league as well? There's a reserves league in the Premier League as well.
Cup, do they? They didn't ever win the FA Cup, do they?
For example, the Carabao Cup, they've won apart from last year, I think they won last year for the last 5, God knows how many years.
I think it's just a thing of, in New Zealand they have the Meter 10 Cup, in South Africa they have the Curry Cup, and here we have the Prem Cup, which is a knockout competition. I feel like that's why you see so many more breakthrough 18-year-old players that genuinely can come to the scene and hold their own at international level. England haven't had one of those in a while, apart from, Marcus Smith didn't start for England at 18, but for South Africa, you had guys like Kanan Moody made his debut last year. He was 18, 19. Fran Steyn, when he started playing with South Africa, he was 18. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So these are guys that have played a higher standard of rugby consistently and then can hold their own.
Well, no, because other than Kanan Moody, you can't name anyone recently. And it's the same with England. Other than Henry Arundel, you can't name anyone recently. And I think that's a good thing because it means that they are special players. We're not just giving appearances to anyone. Do you know what I mean?
I understand what you're trying to say, but South Africa's had more guys, maybe not at international level consistently, but even at a club level. Like guys like Damien Willemse, he was 18 when he started playing for club level consistently. Do you know what I mean? But
so was Marcus Smith in England.
Yeah, but then apart from Marcus Smith, there's not many. But what I'm trying to say is the Curry Cup develops the players. They play a higher standard of rugby, younger players, than what they play here. They have like South Africa A team, New Zealand, Maori, teams below the national team, which can get these guys.
Are you saying the jump? Are you saying the jump from Prem Cup to international and all that stuff is too high of a standard to jump to? Whereas in South Africa, you have more of a staged process.
Yeah. Well, what doesn't make sense to me is if you look at a team like Bristol, you have an 18-year-old who might not play rugby for 2 years because he's just training. And then he's playing club rugby at some club. And then you're going to tell him, yeah, you're now ready to play a professional game of rugby. It doesn't make sense to me. I can't see the logic in it. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Along the lines of this, I've got an interesting question. Do you think if England players, for example, play in the Super Rugby, do you think they still should be allowed to play for England?
Yeah.
Or do you think you have to play in England to play for England? Because I feel like if a lot of England players get more experience in some Southern Hemisphere leagues, do you not think that would kind of almost help their growth as well, since they get different styles of rugby?
I think there's two sides to it. I think if you're trying to develop the English game, having the players in the actual English league probably does make the Premiership more exciting. But I can understand what you just said is them going abroad and getting experience playing different styles of rugby. develops the player singularly. So I understand. Like, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
I agree.
Well,
So you
yeah,
go.
I was just gonna say, like, if you're playing, say, English and you play in England, you play at a club where the England head coach can be in contact with your coach, and you're constantly getting feedback. You know, when you go away for England training camps, you're not going far. It's a lot easier. It's just a lot easier for the players and the coaches will be able to communicate and yeah, just keep that standard high.
Yeah, I think England at times have missed out on. I'm not sure if you guys remember, there was two players that went to France, Stefan and Dylan Armitage, the Armitage brothers. They were class. And I think, you know, when South Africa were going through their dark period as well, that was because we had that rule of, oh yeah, if you're not playing in South Africa, you can't play for South Africa, and the national standard drops massively. If you look at a team like England now, you know what I'm saying, the amount of talents they have playing in foreign nations that they could potentially be using now. It's who's that man we talked about the other day? What's his name?
Zach Mercer.
Yeah.
Zach Mercer. Yeah, absolute baller. Like you can imagine the difference he'd make to this English team, but he's not allowed to play now.
I'd ask the question. I think I should scrap that law if that is a law. But I would also say players like Sam Simmonds and Luke Cowan-Dickie are off to France next season. Are they players that could miss out on England, or do you think their ship is too far gone? Like,
no, they're definitely going to miss out on England. Definitely.
Because I don't think they should though.
Why not?
Because they played like a significant amount of caps for the country. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, I feel like if they're going to make a rule, they should say like, okay, you've played like an X amount of years in the Gallagher Premiership, or you played X amount of caps for the country. If somebody's, I can imagine Sam Simmonds got about 10 caps around there, probably more.
More than that.
Yeah,
Way more.
Way more, right?
So yeah, around 20, 25.
Then how can they be like, oh yeah, he's not allowed to play for the country?
Yeah, that's fair.
You see what I'm trying to say?
And with the French league as well, the standard is just better, which I can understand why players want to go there, because they get more consistent games, which are a higher standard.
And more money.
Simmonds doesn't always... What?
More money as well.
Yeah, more money as well. Money's a massive factor as well. So I think, or you put the English league with different countries. I think that's the only other real option you can do. You kind of mix with the Irish, the Welsh, the French. I don't know.
Unless you're in the top, I think it's the top four that qualify for the Champions Cup. You're not going to be playing teams that are consistently good. So I think if you're a player that is like breaking into the England team, the club team that's mid-table, I'd be going elsewhere as well, just to build my individual.
100%, man, 100%. I think it's quite interesting. But England at the moment, if you guys have been reading, have a bit of an injury crisis going on with guys like Courtney Laws being forced to drop out. But I guess one thing to feel optimistic about as an England fan is the return of Ollie Lawrence to the English team.
Yeah.
What do we think he can bring? Do we think, he has the potential to be a great player for England?
Go on, Ryan, take it away.
So for me, he starts right now. Yeah. I like talking about Ollie Lawrence. He starts for England. I think he should have started. He should have been in the training squad straight away. I don't know why he wasn't. But I'm excited to see him come in. I think he needs to get game time in this Six Nations, and he should be part of the World Cup plans as well.
Yeah, 100%.
I think if you're going to compare him and put him in there, obviously you're going to have to compare him against Chiwalangi, and I think he does more than Chiwalangi. I think he has skill set. Whereas Chiwalangi is quite one-dimensional with ball carrying. I just think Ollie Lawrence offers a whole different skill set, which Chiwalangi doesn't have.
100%. I feel like the issue with Chiwalangi is, if you look at like the early to mid 2010s, that version of Chiwalangi, like obviously he was known for being a very like aggressive ball carrier, but then he also had that athleticism to him. But with consistent injuries and stuff, and he's getting older now. As Kieran's saying, it's that being one-dimensional and only offering ball carrying and nothing else. But I think Ollie Lawrence can do it all. And I would be quite interested to see. I would hope they pair him with somebody maybe like Slade, and they can really do damage together. I think the worst thing you could do to someone like Ollie Lawrence, give him someone like Farrell on the inside. I really feel like that would damage his creativity in terms of what he can do on the pitch for England.
What
I feel like Slade? No,
Go on, Josh.
Go on. No, I was just gonna say I feel like a Slade Smith Lawrence combo could be good because Smith obviously kicking in, but then you have Slade as well because you don't have Farrell. Slade can also kick, and it kind of just all I see there is just creativity. I don't see
Mm,
one-dimensional run try and get over the gain line, but it's there if you need it. But I just see like interest in rugby,
Yeah.
which I think England haven't had in God knows how long.
If you watch Ollie Lawrence for Bath, he's so his skill set is phenomenal. Like him, like inside, like outside red path or something like that. Is he creates so much. He gets over the gain line. He can break tackles. He's got a mean handoff as well. He's got everything like a modern player wants. He just like Rohan said, he just needs some game time for England under his belt.
100%.
Just for me, like I still think Tuolangi is in for a shout at this World Cup, well, regardless of his age. But the one thing that he sort of needs to improve on is when you see teams nowadays when they have an overlap, the defense will look to run, so they'll wait for a forward or someone whose hands aren't as good, and then they'll rush up on him, block the passing lane. And for me, if you did that to Tuolangi at the moment, he'd just take it in. He'd take the ball in, overlap, chance ruined. And he just needs to have
turnover
where he can.
You have that lack of support.
Yeah.
Well, I think the issue, one thing that I've always respected about a team like New Zealand is they operate based off form, not just based off experience.
Yeah.
And I don't think England should find themselves in a situation where they're just starting to Tuolangi just because he's that experienced. Do you know what I mean? They need to go with the best option. And I guess you could say the same for a position like number 9. Ben Youngs still starts just because of his experience, but he's been struggling. You need to look at getting more exciting guys in there like Van Poorfleet. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like it's very similar with this Ollie Lawrence situation. I feel like his experience, it's not long to the World Cup, and I feel like that's the one thing that's maybe putting doubt in Borthwick's mind as to whether he makes the team because he
I don't know what you guys think. Like I don't know what I definitely have a good feel about this England team coming up. I feel like going on with what Jack said about creativity, and I think the team has probably the highest potential of creativity with the amount of form players we're going to get in our squad. I think we've cleared out a lot of our older players and got more creativity in there, which is good.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be mad with just putting out all the young players for the Six Nations and just be like, you know what, we're not really bothered what happens. I know some people might disagree, but I wouldn't be bothered with just putting all the young players out, being like, right, let's see what we can do. Let's see what we need to work on for the World Cup. Let's see what the strengths are. Let's get some structure going and build that chemistry early.
With that one, I think.
Go on, why?
I think at the point now, if this was 2-3 years ago, I'd be agreeing with you. But we're at a point now where a new head coach has just come in. We've got a year to the World Cup, if that. We need consistency. We can't afford to take a risk on the young player for him to not perform and then have to change the position again.
For example, if you're talking about consistency, England are nowhere near the favourites for this World Cup already. Like, there's already 3 or 4 teams that are definitely better than us. So do you not think it's like, right, let's try something different? Because it's not worked in the past. We were the favourites in 2019 World Cup final. We got absolutely smoked by South Africa. They tactically outplayed us. And we had all that experience before. We had like the same starting 15 for God knows how many years before, and it just crumbled in the final. So do you not think it's a fresh start?
Try something different, yeah, but with different players, it's too late now because Eddie Jones has been rotating the squad. We haven't had a consistent team. Some people put the results down to that. I think we just need a consistent team out. You can't really afford to take any risks at this point because we do have the players and we have the experience to win a World Cup. We just need to find the consistency.
Realistically,
I think Steve Borthwick, he picks his team for Scotland in I don't know however long, for about a week or so, a lot less than that. I think he'll know a team he'll take to the World Cup. And he knows a starting team already. I think right now he tries out against Scotland and he uses the Six Nations as a trial period. That's what I think.
Well, I feel like
I want him to do.
I feel like the issue is with England. I don't think you can take some of those same players that lost that 2019 World Cup. I feel like a lot of them never really recovered from that loss. I feel like England as a team, that loss of confidence they experienced. So that's why I wouldn't be completely against what Jack's saying in terms of bringing in those young players, guys like Smith, that can inspire confidence and, really starting anew. Because if you look at it right now, it wouldn't be ridiculous to say that England probably has, if not one of them, probably the best young players in world rugby right now. But it's a familiar story because it depends what is actually done with the players, how they're managed. Do you know what I mean? If Borthwick can really get the formula right of mixing that experience and then mixing that potential as well, I feel like England can do a lot more than what people are predicting them to do this World Cup. I think they can cause an upset 100%.
Yeah, I agree.
I know. I feel like the Six Nations. I think this is. I think this is big for Borthwick because I feel like you have 5 games, I'd say big games. All the teams are a decent standard, even Italy now, and obviously no Wales are trying or whatever. But I feel like this is a time where I feel like just don't keep consistency. I know it sounds stupid, but you have all these young talents coming up, some of the best players in the world, but you're still going to start Farrell. Like, I don't,
Well,
I don't
it
know.
doesn't
I
make
feel like we need
sense.
to move on.
Yeah, 100%. Like looking at England's record next year, I was a bit concerned with the decision to bring back Dan Cole. I know people are saying he's on form at the international level. I just don't think he's an international prop. But England shouldn't make the same mistake of playing the same guys that were playing last year. I really think a change is needed.
Where I think that is wrong, and where my opinion lies, is that you saw with Ellis Genge and Sinclair, they're phenomenal. Like there's not many players like them. And I just think if you could bring off the Marler and Cole, even if it's for 20, 30, 20 10 minutes at a push end of the game, just to win those scrum penalties. We saw in the Autumn Nations how important scrummaging was. And I think if you can bring them off the bench in the last 10, I think it really can reverse some of those penalties which went against us. The reason why we lost the game.
I have to agree with you, to be completely honest. Like the scrum, the set piece is so integral in rugby at the moment. And it's definitely like an area that England, if they strengthen, can be 100% more dangerous. I feel like that is probably the most important thing in the moment at rugby. Like you can be a good team, but if you don't have a good set piece, then you're automatically, yeah.
But would you not say that set piece comes from having experienced players? And we're talking about whether we keep the young players, go on with the new experienced players. I just think for me personally, you can't afford to get rid of the experienced players now. It's too close to a World Cup.
Yeah, but Rohan,
Farrell and Ford, Farrell and Youngs. Say what you want about them as players, the leadership that they'll bring and the experience that they'll have at a World Cup, which is World Cup rugby is different.
You're
100%. For however long you're in there for, you need players that are experienced that know the competition in and out. So you can't
Rohan, for example, you were raving about Zach Mercer, a player who hasn't played for England for God knows how long, and you want him to start straight away, put him in the team.
I'm not talking about if they're more experienced they start. By all means make changes, but you can't forget about the experience. I'm talking about the top end experienced players like Courtney Law, players like Owen Farrell, Ben Youngs. These players they're must have in the squad.
These players haven't proved that they can win a World Cup. They've been at 2 World Cups. The 2015 really disappointing, and 2019 really disappointing because we were going into the final as the favourites after a great game against New Zealand. So do you not think it's time where we're getting to the point where we have this amazing young generation that just give them the chance and see what happens?
But I agree with Rohan, maybe not as close to the World Cup as we are now. I think after the World Cup, then it's a whole new different story.
Yeah.
But then you're waiting 4 years for a big competition.
I'm going to have to agree.
Those young players have time, though. Those young players have time. One thing these experienced players don't have is time. If you need to get the best out of them, you need to play them now, and you need to play them in the next World Cup.
I'm going to have to agree with Jack and say that after the way Ben Youngs and Dan Cole performed in the World Cup final, I don't think psychologically they can go back again and perform. I just don't think they can. I feel like you need to now do a complete sweep and get those young guys in, get Van Poortvliet in, get Smith in. Those guys have that confidence. As much as I have said about Smith, the one thing I respect and admire about him is his confidence, and I feel like that can do bits for England. So guys, quickly, on the topic of young players, who would we say like at the moment is the most exciting young player for England, and why, basically?
For England or in the Premiership?
Or in the Premiership.
All right. Where someone go first?
I'm going to go with Arundel. I think to the fact where England's wingers have been very chopping and changing for the last God knows how long. I think Watson was an amazing player, but again, injured. You had players like Noel, and then you had Johnny May, who was obviously really good on this day, but he's past it now. And I think Arundel was a player where I can see him being one of England's best players and a winger that will start week in, week out.
I would go a complete opposite and say Matteo Carreras is one of the players I would say is so exciting to watch. You watch that guy, he will intercept the try, he'll step everyone, he'll run the length of the pitch. He doesn't get the headlines that he doesn't deserve, that he doesn't get, I don't think. And I think he's so exciting to watch.
I feel like Christ to Shinza has to be up there. I feel like young guy, young forward, and the way he's broken through. And I'm definitely taking into account the fact that he's a forward and he's dominating the way he is. You don't look at him and see, a lack of maturity. He seems so comfortable. The guy I think I feel like it's players like him that can really make a difference for Wales and maybe not make this Six Nations campaign a complete disaster. I really think it'll be huge for them.
I think him and Tommy Raphael are two players that are going to be so key for Wales's four pack this coming Six Nations.
Tommy Raphael's
have you got any other players that stand up?
One player I want to talk about. He's not so young, but I still call him a prospect because of how new he is to the game, and that's Theo McFarland. Just because he's come into this new sport very recently, and he's dominated with his athleticism, his skill set, speed, everything. I think he's the complete player, and the fact that he can get better because of how new he is quite scary because of everything that he can do already.
Just to add to that, the environment he's in as well at Sarries, with Farrell leadership there, he's only going to grow. And I think being at Sarries is going to be the most beneficial thing for him.
Yeah, 100%.
100%. Well, I really think it's exciting times, not just for England, but I really think for the Premiership, in terms of all this young talent we have coming up, I really think it has the potential to be the most exciting league in the world, especially with the style of play and everything. So I guess we should wrap it up, right? All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in today for today's episode. Next week we're going to be looking at the Six Nations. We're going to be doing our predictions. We're going to be doing reactions and a lot more. From us, we're saying goodbye. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week. Jack, do you want to say goodbye?
Bye.